After trying to kiss my wife, she looked at me with disgust and said, "God, Matt, your kisses just make me feel sorry for you. Can you just back off?" That's when I made a decision that destroyed our marriage. I stood there in our downtown Chicago apartment staring at the back of Jessica's auburn hair as she scrolled through her phone like I was invisible. The words hit harder than a slap because they weren't said in anger. They were said with complete indifference, like swatting away an annoying fly. "Got it. No more kisses, nothing from me." "Done," I said, grabbing my keys. I walked out without another word, drove straight to my friend Marcus's place and sat in his cluttered living room, drinking beer and watching basketball. For the first time in months, I felt my shoulders relax. That night flipped a switch in my brain. I realized I wasn't dealing with temporary marriage problems. I was dealing with a woman who had zero respect for me as a person. And respect isn't something you can negotiate or gradually earn back. You either command it or you don't have it at all. What happened next completely blindsided her. Because while she thought she was married to a pushover, she was actually married to someone who'd been quietly documenting everything. Every insult, every public humiliation, every financial detail. By the time she realized I was serious, I had lawyers, evidence, bank records, and a complete exit strategy that left her scrambling. The woman who thought my kisses were pathetic was about to learn exactly what losing me would cost her. And trust me, the price was higher than she ever imagined. Let me explain how I got to this breaking point, because understanding who I was before that devastating moment makes everything that happened afterward so much more powerful. My name is Sarah, and 3 years ago I thought I was living the perfect life. I was 25, working as a marketing coordinator at a mid-sized advertising agency in downtown Denver, pulling in $52,000 annually. Not amazing money, but decent for someone fresh out of college with a communications degree from Colorado State. Matt and I met at a friend's housewarming party in 2019. He was 27, charming, worked in software development, making around $78,000 a year, and had this confident way of talking that made me feel like I was the only person in the room. He was tall, dark-haired, with these piercing blue eyes that seemed to see right through me. When he asked for my number that night, I felt like I'd won the lottery. Our courtship was straight out of a romantic movie. Weekend trips to Aspen, surprise dinners at trendy restaurants, flowers delivered to my office that made all my coworkers jealous. He made me feel beautiful, desired, like I was this incredible catch he couldn't believe he'd found. "You're perfect, Sarah," he'd whisper during those early months. "I can't believe you're mine." We moved in together after 8 months, splitting a gorgeous 2-bedroom apartment in the Highland neighborhood for $2,400 monthly. The arrangement seemed fair. He covered $400, I covered $1,000, and we split utilities and groceries roughly proportional to our incomes. I felt like we were this power couple, building something real together. The proposal came 18 months later at Red Rocks during a concert. Down on one knee with a beautiful princess-cut diamond ring that probably cost him 3 months' salary. I said yes before he even finished asking, tears streaming down my face as the crowd around us cheered. We set the date for June 2021, giving us a year to plan what I imagined would be the perfect wedding. But somewhere between the engagement and the wedding, things started shifting in ways I didn't recognize at the time. Matt began making little comments that felt like jokes, but left me feeling diminished. "Sarah's not much of a cook, but she tries," he'd tell his friends when we had people over. Or, "She's more of a Netflix and wine kind of girl than an adventure type," when someone suggested hiking plans. I brushed it off as typical guy humor. He was still affectionate, still told me he loved me, still seemed excited about our future together. The wedding was beautiful. 150 guests at a venue overlooking the mountains, everything Pinterest perfect. I felt like a princess walking down that aisle, seeing Matt smile as I approached. The first year of marriage was fine. Not the passionate romance of our dating days, but I figured that was normal. People always said the honeymoon phase ends, right? Matt got promoted to senior developer, bumping his salary to $95,000, while I was still grinding away at the same marketing job, hoping for advancement that never seemed to come. He started working longer hours, coming home tired and distracted. Our conversations became more functional, bills to pay, schedules to coordinate, household tasks to divide. The spontaneous date nights disappeared, and the flowers stopped coming. And when I'd try to plan romantic evenings, he'd seem annoyed by the effort, like I was trying too hard. "Can't we just relax tonight?" became his standard response to any suggestion that required leaving the apartment. So we'd order takeout and watch TV, sitting on opposite ends of the couch, both scrolling our phones. I told myself this was just marriage. Comfortable, predictable, stable. The intimacy started declining around our second anniversary. What used to be frequent and passionate became sporadic and mechanical. When I'd initiate, Matt would often seem distracted or tired. "Long day at work," he'd mumble, rolling over to his side of the bed. I began to feel like I was bothering him, like my desire for connection was somehow needy or excessive. I started second-guessing everything about myself. Was I not attractive enough anymore? Had I gained weight? Was I boring? I bought new lingerie, tried to be more spontaneous, suggested weekend getaways to rekindle things. But Matt's responses were always lukewarm at best, politely tolerant at worst. The public comments got sharper too. At his company's holiday party, when I was telling a story about a funny client interaction, Matt interrupted with, "Sarah always thinks her work stories are more interesting than they actually are." The group laughed awkwardly, and I felt my cheeks burn with embarrassment. At my friend Lisa's birthday dinner, when I mentioned wanting to take a pottery class, Matt rolled his eyes. "Sarah's always starting new hobbies she never finishes. Remember the yoga phase? The photography thing?" Again, people laughed, but I felt small, like my interests were silly and my enthusiasm was something to be mocked. I began editing myself around him, staying quiet when I had opinions, avoiding topics that might prompt one of his dismissive comments. I was walking on eggshells in my own marriage, trying to be the version of myself that wouldn't annoy him or give him ammunition for his little jokes. My friends started noticing. "You seem different," Lisa said during one of our girls' nights. "Quieter. Is everything okay with you and Matt?" I assured her everything was fine, that we were just settling into married life, but deep down, I knew something fundamental had shifted. I was no longer the confident, vibrant woman Matt had fallen in love with. I'd become this smaller, more careful version of myself, constantly seeking his approval and fearing his criticism. I didn't realize it then, but I was being systematically broken down, my self-worth slowly eroded by someone who was supposed to love and support me unconditionally. That's who I was on the night. Everything changed. A woman who'd lost herself trying to be perfect for someone who'd stopped seeing her value entirely. But everything started to change when Matt got his new position at TechFlow Dynamics 6 months ago. The promotion to lead software architect came with a $115,000 salary, and suddenly he was in a completely different league professionally. While I was still stuck at the same marketing coordinator role, making my modest $52,000. Matt was now rubbing shoulders with executives, attending conferences, and working on high-profile projects. The shift in his attitude was immediate and obvious. He started talking about his level and his network, like we existed in different social stratospheres. "You wouldn't understand the pressure I'm under," became his go-to response whenever I tried to discuss work stress or share my own professional challenges. At company events, I noticed how differently he interacted with his new colleagues. With them, he was animated, engaged, full of energy and ideas. With me, he seemed bored, like I was this obligation he had to drag along, this reminder of his before life that no longer fit his elevated status. The new crowd he was running with didn't help matters. His boss, Derek, was this divorced guy in his 40s who constantly made jokes about the old ball and chain and how marriage was career suicide for ambitious men. Derek's girlfriend du jour was always some 22-year-old with perfect Instagram photos and zero interest in anything deeper than surface-level conversation. "Derek says I should focus on building my personal brand," Matt announced one evening, scrolling through LinkedIn while I cooked dinner. "Successful people don't let domestic responsibilities hold them back from networking opportunities." I set down the spatula and turned to face him. "Domestic responsibilities? You mean our marriage?" He didn't even look up from his phone. "I mean, I need to be strategic about my time. Every hour I spend at home is an hour I'm not building connections that could advance my career." That's when I realized Matt wasn't just changing. He was actively rewriting our entire relationship narrative. In his new version, I wasn't his partner. I was deadweight. I wasn't supporting his success. I was limiting his potential. The social dynamics became increasingly painful. At Derek's birthday party at some upscale rooftop bar downtown, I watched Matt transform into this version of himself I barely recognized. He was charming, funny, confident, all the qualities that had made me fall in love with him, but directed entirely toward other people. When I tried joining conversations about industry trends or sharing insights from my marketing background, Matt would subtly redirect. "Sarah works in a different kind of marketing," he'd say with a patronizing smile. "More like small-scale stuff." The dismissal was surgical, designed to exclude me without seeming overtly rude. I spent most of that party standing alone by the bar, watching my husband flirt shamelessly with Derek's assistant, a stunning brunette named Vanessa who laughed at everything Matt said like he was the most fascinating man alive. When I mentioned feeling uncomfortable during the drive home, Matt accused me of being insecure and socially awkward. "Maybe if you made more effort to fit in instead of standing around looking miserable, people would want to talk to you," he said, his voice cold and clinical. "Vanessa was just being friendly. Not everything is about you, Sarah." But I wasn't imagining things. Matt's phone habits had become increasingly secretive. He'd take calls in the other room, claiming they were work emergencies that happened to occur at 9 p.m. on weekends. His laptop was suddenly password protected, and he'd snap it shut whenever I walked into the room. The late nights at the office became more frequent. The big project deadline, he'd text at 7 p.m. when he was supposed to be home for dinner. "Don't wait up." I'd eat alone, watching Netflix, feeling like a ghost in my own life. Our friend group started noticing the tension. At Jake and Monica's game night, Matt spent the entire evening making subtle digs about my intelligence. When I correctly answered a trivia question about current events, he seemed genuinely surprised. Wow, Sarah actually knew that one, he said, with mock amazement. Maybe all that time watching the news is paying off. Monica shot me a concerned look across the table. Later, when the guys were outside grilling, she pulled me aside. Is Matt always like that now? Because he's being kind of mean. I found myself making excuses for him. He's just stressed with the new job. It's a lot of pressure. But even as I said it, I knew stress didn't justify cruelty. The Matt I'd married would never have spoken to me that way, especially not in front of friends. The breaking point should have been obvious when he started forgetting important dates. Our third wedding anniversary passed with barely an acknowledgement. No dinner, no flowers, just a distracted, "Oh, right, happy anniversary," as he rushed out the door for another emergency work meeting. When I suggested we plan a weekend getaway to reconnect, Matt looked at me like I'd suggested we rob a bank. "Sarah, I can't just disappear for a weekend. I have responsibilities. This isn't college anymore." But Derek could disappear for long weekends in Vegas with his rotating cast of girlfriends. Matt's colleague, James, could take his wife to Napa for their anniversary. Somehow, everyone else in Matt's professional circle managed to balance career ambition with personal relationships. Everyone except my husband. The most devastating part wasn't the neglect or even the public humiliation. It was watching the man I'd loved completely rewrite our history. In Matt's new narrative, our early relationship had been him settling rather than him being genuinely happy. Our wedding wasn't the best day of his life. It was the day he'd locked himself down before he knew his true potential. "I was different then," he'd say when I'd bring up how things used to be between us. "I didn't know what I was capable of achieving. People grow, Sarah. Maybe you should try it sometime." I was living with someone who'd decided I was beneath him, and he was making sure I felt it every single day. What I didn't realize yet was that Matt's transformation had nothing to do with career success and everything to do with the secret he was keeping. A secret that would explain everything and change the game completely. The real escalation started 3 months ago at Derek's housewarming party in his new penthouse in Lodo. I should have trusted my instincts and stayed home, but Matt insisted I come. "You need to make an effort with my colleagues," he said, adjusting his tie in the mirror. "This is important for my career." The party was everything I expected. Overpriced cocktails, pretentious conversations about cryptocurrency and real estate investments, and women who looked like they'd stepped off magazine covers. I wore my best dress, did my makeup carefully, and walked in feeling reasonably confident. That confidence lasted about 30 minutes. Matt immediately gravitated toward Derek's inner circle, leaving me to navigate conversations with people who clearly saw me as an outsider. When someone asked what I did for work, Matt answered before I could speak. "Sarah's in marketing," he said with a dismissive wave. "Nothing too exciting. She handles social media for local businesses." The way he said it made my job sound like a hobby, something I did to pass time rather than a legitimate career. I felt my cheeks burn as the group's attention immediately shifted away from me. "That's nice," Derek's girlfriend said with a patronizing smile before turning back to discuss their upcoming trip to the Maldives. But the real gut punch came when I overheard Matt talking to Vanessa by the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. I'd gone to the bathroom and was walking back when I heard my name. "Sarah's just comfortable with mediocrity," Matt was saying, his voice carrying that tone he used when he thought he was being profound. "She doesn't have that drive, you know? That hunger for something bigger." Vanessa laughed, a sound like wind chimes that made my stomach clench. "That must be frustrating for someone like you. You're so ambitious, so focused on excellence." "It is," Matt replied, and I could hear the smile in his voice. "Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd waited, you know? If I'd focused on building myself first before settling down." I stood frozen in the hallway, feeling like I'd been punched in the chest. This wasn't just casual conversation. This was my husband expressing regret about marrying me to another woman. I managed to compose myself and rejoin the party, but something fundamental had shifted. I wasn't just being dismissed anymore. I was being actively resented. The drive home was silent until Matt finally spoke. "You were pretty quiet tonight. Everything okay?" I stared out the window at the Denver skyline. "I heard what you said to Vanessa about me being comfortable with mediocrity." Matt's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "You were eavesdropping?" "I was walking back from the bathroom, Matt. You weren't exactly whispering." My voice was steadier than I felt. "Is that really how you see me? As someone who settled?" He was quiet for a long moment, and when he finally spoke, his words cut deeper than any argument could have. "Sarah, I'm not the same person I was 3 years ago. I've grown. I've evolved. Maybe the question isn't how I see you. Maybe it's whether you're willing to evolve too." The implication was clear. I was the problem. I was the one holding us back. I was the one who needed to change to deserve his love again. 2 weeks later came the incident at my friend Rachel's birthday dinner. 8 of us at a trendy restaurant in Reno, celebrating Rachel's promotion to art director. I was genuinely excited to be there, surrounded by friends who actually seemed happy to see me, engaging in conversations where my opinions mattered. Matt arrived late, straight from another work crisis, and immediately dominated the conversation with stories about his latest project. But when Rachel asked about my recent campaign for a local nonprofit, something I was actually proud of, Matt jumped in before I could respond. "Oh, Sarah's little charity thing? It's sweet, really. She likes helping the less fortunate." The way he said it made my work sound like a pity project, something cute and inconsequential. Rachel's eyebrows shot up. "Actually, I saw the campaign. It was really impressive, Sarah. The engagement numbers were incredible." I started to explain the strategy behind it, feeling a rare moment of professional confidence when Matt interrupted again. "Well, it's not exactly Fortune 500 level work, but Sarah does her best with what she has." The table went quiet. My friend Lisa actually gasped. "Excuse me," she said, her voice sharp. Matt seemed oblivious to the tension he'd created. "I'm just saying there are different levels of marketing. Sarah works at a smaller scale." "Smaller scale?" Rachel's voice was ice cold. "Sarah just increased their donor engagement by 340% and brought in $50,000 in new funding. What exactly do you consider larger scale, Matt?" For the first time in months, I watched my husband look genuinely uncomfortable. He mumbled something about different metrics and industry standards, but the damage was done. My friends had witnessed him publicly diminish my achievements, and their protective anger was palpable. In the Uber home, the silence was deafening until Lisa texted me, "Girl, what the hell was that? Since when does Matt talk to you like that?" I showed Matt the text, hoping it might spark some self-reflection. Instead, he rolled his eyes. "Your friends don't understand professional dynamics. They're taking it personally when it's just objective reality." "Objective reality?" I stared at him in disbelief. "Matt, you humiliated me in front of my friends." "I stated fact, Sarah. If you're embarrassed by your career level, maybe that's something you should address instead of expecting me to pretend you're something you're not." That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying his words, "Pretend you're something you're not." When had loving me become an act of pretense for him? The final escalation happened at his company's quarterly celebration last month. TechFlow had landed a major client, and Derek was throwing a party at some exclusive club downtown. Matt spent an hour getting ready, styling his hair, choosing the perfect shirt. "This is a big night," he said, checking himself in the mirror. "Important people will be there." I wasn't sure if I was invited until Matt mentioned, almost as an afterthought, that spouses were welcome. "Just try to blend in, okay? Don't monopolize conversations or anything." The party was a nightmare from the moment we arrived. Matt immediately abandoned me to work the room, leaving me standing alone by the bar like some corporate wife accessory. I tried mingling, but every conversation felt forced and superficial. The breaking point came when I overheard Derek talking to a group of executives near the VIP section. "Matt's really hitting his stride," Derek was saying. "Smart, driven, focused. Only thing holding him back is..." He gestured vaguely in my direction. "Domestic obligations." The group laughed knowingly, and I felt my face burn with humiliation. But worse was seeing Matt in that circle nodding along with a smile that suggested he agreed completely. When Vanessa approached me later, her smile was predatory. "You must be so proud of Matt," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "He's really making a name for himself. Derek thinks he has unlimited potential." "That's great," I managed, trying to keep my voice steady. "It must be hard, though," she continued, "being married to someone so ambitious when you're more settled in your comfort zone." The words hit like a slap. This woman, this stranger, was echoing the exact sentiment my husband had been expressing for months. I realized then that Matt hadn't just been sharing his frustrations with Vanessa. He'd been actively painting me as dead weight to anyone who would listen. "Excuse me," I said, walking away before I said something I'd regret. I found Matt by the windows, deep in conversation with Derek and two other executives. When I approached, the conversation stopped abruptly. "Ready to go?" I asked quietly. Matt checked his watch with obvious annoyance. "It's barely 10, Sarah. This is a networking event." "I'm tired. I'll take an Uber home." "Fine," he said, not even looking at me. "I'll see you later." I stood there for a moment, waiting for him to say something else, maybe ask if I was okay or offer to come with me. Instead, he turned back to his conversation like I'd never been there at all. That was the night I realized I wasn't just being neglected or dismissed. I was being systematically erased from my husband's life, one public humiliation at a time. And the worst part? He was enjoying it. The moment that changed everything happened 3 weeks ago on a Tuesday night. I'd been working late on a campaign proposal for a potential new client, a tech startup that could actually elevate my career if I landed them. I was excited, energized, feeling like maybe I could prove Matt wrong about my professional capabilities. I got home around 9 p.m., takeout in hand, ready to share my excitement about the project. Matt was on the couch, laptop open, looking relaxed, in a way I hadn't seen in months. For a brief moment, I felt hopeful. Maybe we could have a normal conversation. Maybe he'd be proud of me for once. Hey, I said, setting down the food. I brought Thai from that place you like. I had the most amazing day. I think I might land this huge client and... Sarah, Matt interrupted without looking up from his screen. Can you keep it down? I'm on a call with the Singapore team. I looked around confused. He wasn't wearing headphones. There was no indication he was on a call. I don't see... It's a Slack call, he said impatiently. Some of us have international responsibilities. I felt the familiar sting of dismissal, but something was different this time. Maybe it was the confidence from my successful day, or maybe I was just tired of being treated like an inconvenience in my own home. Instead of retreating to the bedroom like usual, I sat down and opened the takeout containers. Well, when you're done saving the world, I got pad thai and spring rolls, I said, trying to keep my tone light. Matt's jaw tightened. He closed the laptop with more force than necessary. You know what, Sarah? This is exactly what I'm talking about. I'm trying to work, trying to advance my career, and you waltz in here expecting me to drop everything for takeout and small talk about your little projects. Little projects? The words came out sharper than I intended. Matt, this client could change everything for me. It's a 6-figure contract. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. 6 figures? Sarah, come on. You work for a tiny agency that handles mom and pop shops. Let's be realistic about what 6 figures means in your world. Something inside me snapped. My world? What's that supposed to mean? It means you're playing in the minor leagues while I'm competing at a professional level. It means your biggest win is still smaller than my average Tuesday. He stood up, towering over me. It means maybe it's time you accepted that we're not in the same category anymore. I stared at him, this man I'd married, this person who used to celebrate my smallest victories. When did you become so cruel? I'm not cruel, Sarah. I'm honest. There's a difference. He moved toward the kitchen, then turned back. You want to know what's cruel? Watching someone you care about refuse to grow, refuse to challenge themselves, refuse to become anything more than this. He gestured at me like I was something distasteful, something disappointing. The casual cruelty of it took my breath away. This? I stood up, my voice shaking. What exactly is this, Matt? Mediocre, he said simply. Comfortable with mediocre. We stood there in silence, the weight of that word hanging between us like a blade. I felt something fundamental break inside me, not just my heart, but my willingness to keep trying to earn his approval. I see, I said quietly. And what about you? What are you? I'm someone who refuses to settle, he said with that self-satisfied tone I'd grown to hate. Someone who pushes boundaries, takes risks, demands excellence from himself and the people around him. Is that what you call this? I gestured between us. Excellence? His expression shifted, becoming colder. Sarah, I think we need to have a serious conversation about where this marriage is going. My stomach dropped. What do you mean? I mean, I've been doing a lot of thinking lately, about what I want from life, about whether I'm living up to my potential. He sat back down, but his posture was rigid, formal. I've been talking to Derek about it, actually, and some other people. Other people? The words came out as a whisper. People who understand ambition. People who get what it means to prioritize growth over comfort. He looked at me with something that might have been pity. Sarah, you're a good person, you're kind, you're loyal, you're safe, but I don't want safe anymore. I felt like I was watching our marriage end in real time, but there was something else. A nagging feeling that this speech was too polished, too prepared. How long have you been planning this conversation? It's not about planning, it's about recognizing reality. He leaned forward, his voice taking on that patronizing tone I'd learned to dread. We got married when we were different people. I was content with a smaller life then, but I've evolved, and honestly, you haven't. Evolved, I repeated flatly. Is that what we're calling it? Sarah, don't make this harder than it needs to be. And we both know this hasn't been working for a while. That's when it hit me. The real reason behind his sudden confidence, his willingness to have this conversation. There's someone else, isn't there? Matt's face went carefully blank. That's not what this is about. That's not an answer. Sarah, is there someone else, Matt? My voice was getting louder, but I didn't care. Because this whole speech about evolution and growth and demanding excellence, it sounds like something you've practiced. You're being paranoid. Am I? I grabbed his phone from the coffee table. Then you won't mind if I... Don't. His voice was sharp, dangerous. Put that down. Why? I held the phone up, watching his face. What are you hiding? I'm not hiding anything. I just don't appreciate being accused of... Of what, Matt? Of cheating? Of lying? Of systematically destroying my self-esteem so you could justify whatever you've been doing behind my back? The silence stretched between us, and in that silence, I saw the truth written across his face. The guilt, the defensiveness, the anger at being caught. It's Vanessa, isn't it? The words came out calm, almost curious. Derek's assistant, the one who thinks you're so fascinating. Matt's face went white. Sarah, you don't understand. I understand perfectly. I set his phone down gently, my hands surprisingly steady. I understand that you've been having an affair and using my supposed inadequacy to justify it. I understand that you've been systematically tearing me down so you could feel better about betraying me. It's not like that. What's it like then, Matt? Explain it to me. I sat down across from him, my voice eerily calm. Explain how sleeping with another woman while telling me I'm mediocre is actually about my failure to evolve. He ran his hands through his hair, the confident facade cracking. Sarah, it just happened. Vanessa and I, we connect on a different level. She understands my ambitions, my goals. She understands your dick, Matt. Let's not dress it up as some intellectual connection. He flinched at my bluntness. You don't have to be crude about it. Crude? I laughed, and the sound surprised both of us. Matt, you've been fucking another woman while telling me my kisses make you feel sorry for me, and you're worried about me being crude? I never said that about your kisses. Not yet. But you were building up to it, weren't you? The systematic degradation, the public humiliation, the constant reminders that I'm not good enough for the new and improved Matt. I stood up, feeling strangely powerful. How long? Sarah, how long have you been sleeping with her? He was quiet for a long moment. 4 months. 4 months. 4 months of lies, of gaslighting, of making me feel like I was crazy for sensing something was wrong. 4 months of him coming home to me after being with her, making me feel grateful for scraps of attention while he was giving his best self to someone else. 4 months, I repeated. So this whole thing about me not evolving, about you outgrowing me, that was all just cover for the fact that you're a cheating coward who couldn't be honest about what he wanted. It's more complicated than that. No, Matt, it's really not. I walked to the window, looking out at the city lights. It's actually very simple. You wanted to have an affair, but you didn't want to be the bad guy, so you decided to make me the problem. Make me so insecure, so desperate for your approval, that when you finally left, everyone would understand why. That's exactly what it is. I turned back to face him. You've been systematically destroying my self-esteem for months, making me feel like I should be grateful you even tolerate me. Also, you could justify fucking Derek's assistant. Matt stood up, his face flushed with anger and embarrassment. You want to know the truth, Sarah? Fine. Yes, I've been seeing Vanessa. Yes, she makes me feel things you haven't made me feel in years. She's ambitious. She's exciting. She challenges me. She's 24 and thinks you're important because you have a fancy job title. She sees my potential. She sees your paycheck, Matt, and your willingness to cheat on your wife probably makes you feel very dangerous and exciting. I picked up my purse from the counter. But here's what you didn't count on. What's that? I smiled, and for the first time in months, it felt genuine. You didn't count on me figuring it out. You thought you could gaslight me into believing I was the problem, that I was lucky to have you, that losing you would be the worst thing that could happen to me. Sarah, where are you going? To Lisa's. To think. To figure out what comes next. I headed toward the door, then turned back. Oh, and Matt, when you tell Vanessa about this conversation, and I know you will, make sure you mention that your mediocre wife saw right through your pathetic little game. Sarah, wait. But I was already walking out the door, leaving him standing in our apartment with the ruins of his carefully constructed narrative scattered around his feet. For the first time in months, I felt like myself again, and I was about to show Matt exactly what this mediocre woman was capable of. I spent that night at Lisa's, crying into a bottle of wine while she alternated between comforting me and plotting Matt's demise. I knew something was off, she kept saying. The way he's been treating you lately, it all makes sense now. What a manipulative piece of shit. But by morning, something had shifted. The tears had stopped, and in their place was something I hadn't felt in months. Clarity. I wasn't devastated anymore. I was angry. And anger, I was discovering, was much more useful than heartbreak. I need a lawyer, I told Lisa over coffee. A good one. Already on it, she said, sliding a business card across the table. My cousin went through a nasty divorce last year. This woman is a shark. Jennifer Walsh's office was in a sleek downtown building, all glass and steel that screamed success. She was exactly what I needed. Mid-40s, sharp-eyed, with the kind of confidence that comes from winning battles other people are afraid to fight. Tell me everything, she said, pulling out a legal pad. And I mean everything. Every text, every conversation, every financial detail. I laid it all out. The systematic emotional abuse, the public humiliation, the affair, the way Matt had been positioning himself as the victim of my inadequacy while cheating behind my back. Jennifer took notes, occasionally asking pointed questions about timelines and witnesses. This is good, she said when I finished. Really good. Colorado is a no-fault state, but emotional abuse and adultery absolutely factor into asset division and spousal support. Do you have any evidence of the affair? Not yet, but I know where to get it. That afternoon, I did something I never thought I'd do. I hired a private investigator. Marcus Chen came highly recommended by Jennifer's office, and within 48 hours, he had what we needed. Photos of Matt and Vanessa at restaurants, hotels, her apartment building, credit card receipts for expensive dinners and weekend getaways I'd never heard about, text message records showing months of communication. Your husband wasn't very careful, Marcus said, handing me a thick folder. They've been meeting regularly at the Marriott downtown. Always pays cash for the room, but uses his card for everything else. Amateur mistake. The evidence was devastating and comprehensive. But more than that, it was proof that I wasn't crazy, wasn't paranoid, wasn't the problem. Everything I'd sensed, every instinct I doubted had been absolutely correct. Meanwhile, Matt was spiraling. He'd been calling and texting constantly since I left, alternating between apologies and accusations. Sarah, please come home so we can talk about this rationally. Then, an hour later, you're being dramatic. This doesn't have to destroy everything we've built. I didn't respond to any of it. Instead, I focused on practical matters. I opened my own bank account and started transferring my paychecks there. I changed my emergency contacts at work. I began documenting our shared assets and debts with forensic precision. The confrontation came a week later when Matt showed up at Lisa's apartment. I was ready for him. Sarah, this is ridiculous, he said when Lisa reluctantly let him in. You can't just disappear. We're married. We need to work through this. Work through what, exactly? I asked calmly. Your 4-month affair? Your systematic campaign to destroy my self-esteem? Which part would you like to work through first? I made a mistake, okay? But that doesn't mean we have to throw away 3 years of marriage. You threw it away, Matt. I'm just acknowledging reality. I pulled out my phone and showed him one of Marcus's photos, him and Vanessa kissing outside her apartment building. This was taken yesterday, so your mistake is ongoing. His face went pale. You hired a private investigator? I hired a professional to document the truth since you seem incapable of telling it. I swiped to another photo. This one's from last Tuesday, the night you told me you were working late on the Singapore project. Sarah, you don't understand. I understand perfectly. You wanted to have your cake and eat it too. Keep me around to pay half the bills and maintain your respectable married image while fucking Derek's assistant on the side. I stood up, feeling powerful in a way I'd forgotten was possible. But here's what you didn't count on. I'm not the pathetic, desperate woman you tried to turn me into. What do you want? His voice was smaller now, defeated. I want a divorce. Clean, simple, and with you taking full responsibility for destroying our marriage. I handed him Jennifer's business card. Have your lawyer call mine. We'll work out the details. Sarah, please. I love you. I know I screwed up, but you love me? I laughed, and the sound was sharp enough to cut glass. Matt, you spent months systematically destroying my confidence, making me feel worthless. Also, you could justify cheating on me. That's not love. That's psychological abuse. He tried to argue, to explain, to somehow reframe his betrayal as a temporary lapse in judgment. But I was done listening. I was done caring about his feelings, his explanations, his desperate attempts to avoid consequences. The affair was bad enough, I said as he prepared to leave. But the gaslighting, the emotional manipulation, the way you tried to make me believe I was the problem, that's unforgivable. You didn't just cheat on me, Matt. You tried to destroy me. I never meant. Yes, you did. You absolutely meant to. Because destroying me was the only way you could justify what you were doing. I opened the door for him. But here's the thing about trying to break someone. Sometimes you just make them stronger. After he left, Lisa poured us both wine. How do you feel? I thought about it for a moment. Free, I said finally. For the first time in months, I feel free. The next morning I woke up with a clarity I hadn't experienced in years. I wasn't just ending a marriage, I was reclaiming my life. And I was about to show Matt exactly what this mediocre woman was capable of achieving. Looking back now, I can see exactly how Matt's manipulation worked, and it's terrifying how subtle and systematic it was. He didn't wake up one day and decide to destroy my self-esteem. It was a gradual erosion, so slow and calculated that I barely noticed it happening until I was drowning in self-doubt. The first lesson I learned is that emotional abuse doesn't always look like screaming and throwing things. Sometimes it looks like a husband who makes you feel grateful for basic respect. Sometimes it's disguised as honesty or pushing you to be better. Matt never called me names or raised his voice. Instead, he used surgical precision to cut away at my confidence, one helpful observation at a time. You always think your work stories are more interesting than they actually are. Sarah's not much of a cook, but she tries. Maybe if you made more effort to fit in. Each comment seemed harmless in isolation, but together they created a narrative that I was fundamentally inadequate, fundamentally disappointing. The genius of it was that he made me complicit in my own diminishment. I started editing myself, staying quiet, avoiding topics that might prompt his criticism. I became smaller and smaller, trying to be the version of myself that wouldn't annoy him. I was so focused on not being too much that I forgot how to be enough. But here's what I understand now. Matt's behavior had nothing to do with my actual worth and everything to do with his own insecurity and guilt. He was cheating, lying, betraying everything our marriage stood for, and the cognitive dissonance was unbearable. So instead of dealing with his own moral failure, he decided to make me the problem. If I was mediocre, then leaving me was justified. If I was holding him back, then his affair was practically self-defense. If I was comfortable with a smaller life, then he was the victim of my lack of ambition. He rewrote our entire relationship history to cast himself as the hero of his own story and me as the obstacle he needed to overcome. The second lesson is about recognizing gaslighting in real time. When someone consistently makes you question your own perceptions, when you find yourself constantly apologizing for things that aren't your fault, when you start believing that your reasonable expectations are actually unreasonable demands, those are red flags the size of billboards. I spent months thinking I was being too sensitive, too needy, too demanding. I apologized for wanting affection from my husband. I felt guilty for expecting basic respect in my own home. I convinced myself that his public humiliation was just guy humor and that I needed to develop thicker skin. But the truth is, I wasn't being too sensitive. I was being systematically conditioned to accept unacceptable treatment. Matt was training me to expect less and less until I'd be grateful for scraps of basic human decency. The third lesson is about the power of documentation and external perspective. If I hadn't confided in Lisa, if I hadn't seen the horror in my friends' faces when they witnessed Matt's behavior, I might have continued believing his version of reality. Isolation is an abuser's best friend because it eliminates outside voices that might contradict their narrative. When Rachel defended my work at that birthday dinner, when Lisa texted me asking what the hell was wrong with Matt, when Monica pulled me aside at game night, those moments of external validation were lifelines. They reminded me that the way Matt was treating me wasn't normal, wasn't acceptable, wasn't something I had to tolerate. The fourth lesson is about the difference between love and control. Matt didn't love me. He loved having power over me. He loved being the arbiter of my worth, the person who decided whether I was good enough on any given day. Real love builds you up, supports your growth, celebrates your victories. It doesn't systematically tear you down to make itself feel bigger. When someone truly loves you, they don't need to diminish you to feel good about themselves. They don't need to rewrite your history together to justify their bad behavior. They don't need to convince you that you're lucky to have them while they're secretly planning your replacement. But perhaps the most important lesson is this: you cannot love someone into respecting you. I spent months trying to be better, trying to earn back Matt's affection, trying to prove I was worthy of basic human decency. I thought if I just worked harder, complained less, needed less, he'd remember why he fell in love with me. The truth is, Matt's respect wasn't something I could earn because he'd already decided I didn't deserve it. His love wasn't something I could win back because it had been conditional all along. I was fighting a battle that was rigged from the start, trying to solve a problem that was never actually about me. The moment I stopped trying to prove my worth to someone who had already decided I was worthless, everything changed. I remembered who I was before I started shrinking myself to fit his narrow definition of acceptable. And that woman? She was never mediocre. She was just married to someone who needed her to believe she was. The divorce was finalized 4 months later, and it went better than I could have imagined. Jennifer was right. The evidence of Matt's affair and emotional abuse made all the difference. In Colorado, adultery might not be grounds for divorce, but it absolutely impacts asset division and spousal support decisions. Matt tried to play hardball initially, claiming he deserved half of everything because marriage is a partnership. But when Jennifer presented the private investigator's evidence and a detailed timeline of his systematic emotional abuse, his lawyer quickly advised him to settle. He ended up with 35% of our shared assets, no spousal support, and the responsibility for his own legal fees. The best part? I got to keep our apartment. Matt had to find somewhere else to live, which meant leaving his convenient downtown location and his carefully curated lifestyle. Last I heard through mutual friends, he'd moved to a cramped one-bedroom in the suburbs, splitting his time between there and Vanessa's place. Speaking of Vanessa, that relationship imploded spectacularly about 6 weeks after our separation. Turns out, Derek's assistant wasn't as impressed with Matt. Once he was a divorced man with legal fees and a damaged reputation, instead of a successful married man with disposable income. She moved on to someone higher up the corporate ladder, leaving Matt to deal with the awkwardness of working in the same office as his ex-mistress. The professional consequences were swift and brutal. Derek, it turns out, didn't appreciate his assistant being poached by a subordinate, especially when it created workplace drama. Matt's meteoric rise at TechFlow came to an abrupt halt. No more high-profile projects, no more executive meetings, no more talk of unlimited potential. He's still there, but he's back to being just another senior developer, and his dreams of corporate greatness have been permanently derailed. Meanwhile, I landed that six-figure client I'd been excited about the night everything exploded. The tech startup loved my campaign proposal, and the success of that project led to 3 more major contracts. Within 6 months of my divorce, I doubled my income and gained recognition in Denver's marketing community. I also started therapy with Dr. Amanda Rodriguez, who helped me understand the full scope of what I'd experienced. What Matt did to you is called covert narcissistic abuse, she explained during one of our sessions. It's designed to be invisible, to make the victim question their own reality while the abuser maintains plausible deniability. Learning the clinical terms for Matt's behavior was incredibly validating. I wasn't crazy, wasn't oversensitive, wasn't imagining things. I was the victim of a calculated psychological campaign designed to break down my self-worth so Matt could justify his betrayal. Dr. Rodriguez also helped me recognize the patterns that had made me vulnerable to Matt's manipulation. My people-pleasing tendencies, my fear of conflict, my willingness to accept responsibility for other people's emotions, all traits that made me an ideal target for someone like Matt. The good news, she told me, is that recognizing these patterns means you can change them. You can learn to trust your instincts, set boundaries, and refuse to accept treatment that doesn't honor your worth. 6 months post-divorce, I'm living a life I couldn't have imagined during those dark months of my marriage. I wake up every morning in my beautiful apartment, the one Matt thought he deserved half of, and I don't have to brace myself for criticism or contempt. I can cook what I want, watch what I want, invite friends over without worrying about someone making cutting remarks about my choices. I've been on a few dates, nothing serious yet, but the difference is remarkable. I know my worth now. I know what I bring to a relationship, and I know what I deserve in return. I won't settle for someone who sees my love as a burden or my presence as an inconvenience. Lisa jokes that I should send Matt a thank you card. He did you the biggest favor of your life by showing you who he really was, she says. And in a twisted way, she's right. If Matt had been a better liar, if he'd been more subtle about his affair, I might have spent years in that toxic marriage, slowly losing myself piece by piece. Instead, his arrogance and cruelty forced a confrontation that saved my life. His need to justify his betrayal by destroying my self-esteem backfired spectacularly because it made me angry enough to fight back. To anyone reading this who recognizes themselves in my story, who's walking on eggshells in their own home, who's constantly apologizing for existing, who's been convinced that their partner's contempt is somehow their fault, please know this: you are not the problem. You're not too sensitive, too needy, too much. You're being systematically conditioned to accept unacceptable treatment. Trust your instincts. Document everything. Find people who will remind you of your worth when you forget it yourself. And remember that sometimes the best thing someone can do for you is show you exactly who they are so you can decide whether that's someone you want in your life. Matt thought he was breaking me. Instead, he set me free, and I've never been more grateful for anything in my life.